So, Steam hosts an annual event called the Next Fest that is meant to showcase a bunch of upcoming indie games. Me, being someone that isn't really all that interested in indie games, has usually just ignored the Next Fest, but with the release of some really solid indie games in the past few years like Hollow Knight, Ori, Dead Cells and Grease, I've gotten a lot more interested. So when I randomly saw that Next Fest was once again ongoing, I thought, hey, why not? Maybe I could buy some bangers. So I clicked on the banner, went onto the most popular game section and did some scrolling. Picked out a bunch of games that I thought looked interesting, downloaded the demos, and tried them all out. This video will be a compilation of my thoughts on the games that I personally enjoyed the most. So with the intro out of the way, let's get into it.
A long cold. Those lands are built on mysteries and menaces. Mutants, cults, psychomorphs. My family swore an oath to protect any who remain here. I will not fail.
The first game that I tried was a roguelike deck builder called Beneath Oresa by the studio Broken Spear. Broken Spear seems to be a completely new studio, and Beneath Oresa their debut title. Starting with the visuals, which are mostly done in a cel-shade types art style, reminiscent of Borderlands, especially when it comes to the character models. All of the demo takes place in the series, a matching setting for the darker aesthetic the game is going for. The character designs for both the playable characters and the enemies are all well done and interesting looking. The animations for the game are also well done, being smooth while still feeling impactful when the characters attack, so overall, I have no complaints in the visual department. Moving on to the gameplay. As I said in the start of the section, the game is a roguelike deck builder. This means that in the game, you travel through a dungeon while picking up and upgrading cards. These cards are what you'll be using as your actions during combat, some being utility and some being attack based. There is no queuing system in the game for playing cards like in other games. Once you play a card, your character will then do the move right away. This leads to one of the strengths of the game, the animation and flow of combat. As you play cards, your character will move and do the attack linked to the card. If you play them in quick succession, he will combo them quite seamlessly. This makes it so that if you plan your entire turn and play your cards back to back, the combat flows really well and looks something out of a scripted cutscene. I find this to be in contrast to most other deck building games, which are usually very static and limited on the visuals. The combat itself is fairly standard when compared to other games like it. You have your attack-based cards that will directly deal damage to the enemies, and then you have ability/spell cards, which are more utility-based. You also have an armor system, which is a flat amount of armor that your character has for a turn that will soak any damage you take until it reaches 0. The most unique mechanic the game has to offer is a special meter. What the meter does seems to be different depending on what character you're currently playing, but at least for the character you get to play during the demo, it makes it so that your next attack directed at you will automatically get countered and is still deal damage to the attacking enemy. The way you raise this meter is by either playing cards that directly add to the meter, or by another unique mechanic which will tag 2 of the cards in your hand, and if these cards do not get played during your turn, they will greatly boost your meter. I think it's an interesting mechanic that has a lot of potential to add variety to the different characters. We'll have to wait and see at the full release of the game. Overall, I find the game to be challenging, but not so hard that the game is difficult to get into. There are other systems such as a companion system and several encounter mechanics as you travel through the dungeon, but I feel as though it will take too long to talk about them, and I do want there to be some surprises still waiting for you if you do decide to check the game out yourself. I do still have some critiques that I would like to talk about. Most of these are minor and quality of life things, but I still think it's fair to point them out as this is a demo for an unreleased game, and they are actively seeking feedback for it. Main problem I have with the game is that it doesn't explain itself very well. It does have a few tutorials for some of the systems, but all of the small stuff just simply does not get explained. There is simply no way of finding out what a certain card effect does without either playing the card and seeing what happens, or just looking it up online. This makes for a fairly frustrating start to the game where you have to play cards with keywords you don't understand and hoping you get an idea of what it does. I would like if there was a little pop-up when you hover the keyword that briefly explained what it does, just like most other card games does. Next, I think the visibility when you're in combat is pretty poor. Your only way of changing your target is by using the scroll wheel. This will make the camera look in the direction of the selected target, something that will more often than not make so that you can't see the rest of the board. I think adding a menu in the corner of the screen which shows all the enemies along with their health and whatever status effects they might have greatly improve the visibility, as you wouldn't have to use your scroll wheel to look at each individual enemy to get a general idea of what you're up against. The rest of my complaints are minor quality of life things. For example, when you use a card that lets you choose between several options, the game will then proceed to hide the hand from you. In card games, I think it's generally a good idea for you to be able to see your hands at all times. Another thing that bothers me more than it probably should is whenever you have the option to pick one of several cards, you have to click the card you want to select, but if you then change your mind, you have to click the same card again to be able to pick another card. Again, this is a very minor thing, but I would like small quality of life things like this to be added to the game for an overall smoother experience. Beneath Oresa is overall an extremely well made game, with good combat, interesting dungeon crawling mechanics, and great visuals. With a lot of potential for replayability with 9 different playable characters and several different zones at release, Beneath Oresa is definitely a game I'll be checking out when it releases later this year. A little disclaimer before we start this segment. By the time I actually got around to making this video, Cult of the Lamb had already been released and I have played the full version of the game. I still think that my thoughts of the demo reflects my overall opinion of the game, so I'm still going to keep it in the video. Next up, we have Cult of the Lamb, an action roguelike dungeon crawler developed by Massive Monster. In contrast to the last game, Massive Monster has already produced several finished games, both being fairly niche but well received games. Though to be fair, I was more interested in the publisher for this one, seeing how it is being published by Devolver. With Devolver's long history of publishing very solid games, I went into this game with fairly high expectations. Right away, the first thing anyone will notice with this game is how it is positively dripping with style. From the art style, to the dialogue, to the animation, everything in this game is made with the same sort of style in mind. It perfectly balances between the creepy and the cute, never fully crossing too far into the other one. There are some pretty dark themes in the game. I mean, the game literally does start with your execution. After you have been killed in order to stop some sort of god from being summoned, you immediately meet said god. You're then given a quote-unquote choice if you want to be revived, with the caveat that you'll have to start a cult in the honor of this god. After happily agreeing, you're revived with a newfound ability to fight back. You then proceed to kill all your captors, and then get to start the game proper. The combat is fairly standard for this type of game. You have your normal attacks, a roll, and a magic power that you can swap out during your different runs. To compensate for the fairly standard combat, it feels extremely well polished. It both looks and feels really responsive to play around with. You can also swap out both your weapons and powers several times throughout each run. Changing your weapons not only changes the amount of damage you do, but it also changes the weapon speed. This spices up the gameplay by forcing you to adapt your playstyle to fit your new weapon. The powers, on the other hand, are all very different from each other, giving you plenty of room to experiment to figure out what sort of loadouts are your favorite. When it comes to the actual dungeon crawling aspects of the game, I think it is very clearly inspired by Binding of Isaac. You have several rooms chained together in a grid-based system, with several of them being special type rooms where you can find items, shops, and other mechanics. One of these mechanics is a tarot card inspired system that gives you a choice between several buffs that you get for the rest of your run. A problem I ran into with the dungeon crawling is the rooms themselves, as they can be pretty small and cluttered with a lot of stuff in them, sometimes making it hard to see enemies and what they're doing. I think the game could benefit greatly from having slightly larger rooms to give the player more space to move around in. Other than that, I think the dungeon crawling is very well made and thought out, with enough diversity to make each run unique. Another major mechanic is the cult system. As you promise your god, you do slowly start forming a cult. This cult is made up of characters that you meet throughout your dungeon crawling and are for the most part all unique, with some even being the bosses that you've fought. You also have your own hub for this cult where your cult members will show up after you save them. Here you can name and customize your cultists with a surprising amount of customization options to make them look however you want them to. Other things you can do in the hub include base building. You can create several different buildings which both benefit you and your cultist. This is done by collecting materials from both your hub and from the dungeon crawling you do, though you can simply have your cultists collecting materials from the hub if you're feeling lazy. You also have to keep your cultists fed by cooking them food in your base, or by feeding them food that you find throughout your dungeon crawling. These all come with their own unique upsides and downsides, allowing you for a decent amount of choice for whatever need you happen to have at the time. From what the demo showed, the cult system doesn't seem to be all that complex, but it's a fun thing to do as a break from the dungeon crawling. I do find this to be one of the more creative and unique mechanics in the game, and I am looking forward to seeing how it fully functions in the game when it releases later this year. As for a third game, I tried out Glimmer in Mirror. It is made by Maple Dorm Games. I tried to do some digging, but I couldn't really find much about the developers. They're a Chinese company. This is their first game, and it was also crowdfunded. It currently does have a publisher, but they are also Chinese, so information on them is also pretty limited. What immediately stood out to me about Glimmer in the Mirror are the visuals. The visuals for the games are absolutely stunning, from the in-game sprites and backgrounds to the promotional art and start screen. It is an anime-inspired art style leaning more towards a chibi style. The backgrounds are very well detailed and all look stunning. Colors are also used to the fullest potential, with a vibrant, full reminiscent orange and brown being the primary colors for the demo, and going off of the screenshot, later parts of the game will also be using a lot of green, more reminiscent of spring or summer. This use of color also extends to the character designs. Shiro, the main playable character, uses a mix of dark and light blue, something that makes her pop on screen in front of most backgrounds. Her design is memorable and unique without being cluttered, something that can also be said for the rest of the cast, though some of the side characters can have a bit similar designs, making it a bit hard to differentiate between them sometimes. So after having given the game some well-deserved praise for the visuals, I do also have to tell you a gripe I have with it. And if you have been watching the gameplay while I've been talking, you probably noticed it, that being the extreme stuttering. To be frank, I have no idea what was causing it. I tried to fix it for quite a while before I started recording, but I couldn't find any fix or anyone else complaining about the issue. Given this, I wouldn't really hold it much against the game, since it's likely something on my end, and I guess it's really rare. Moving on to the gameplay. The game is a fairly standard side-scroller with a shooting-based combat system. My main problem with the game is how the shooting works, though. It might look fine when watching the gameplay, but when playing the game, it ends up feeling pretty awkward and stiff. There isn't any way to actually control where you're shooting vertically. You can only shoot straight forwards. This in itself isn't necessarily bad, but when combined with the fact that several of the enemies can fly, it ends up being pretty frustrating. You can end up just kind of sitting around waiting for a while for the enemy to actually hover a centimeter lower so you can finally hit it. This is where I have to admit that I did somewhat lie earlier when I said that you can't aim up or down, because there is a system in place that lets you shoot enemies that are slightly above or below where you would normally fire. But from my experience, it seems completely random when this works. I sat down for some time actively trying to recreate it after I had it happen for the first time by accident, but I had no luck actually getting it to happen again with any sort of consistency. Obviously this might just be my fault for being stupid and missing some really obvious mechanic to the game, so if someone has played this game and knows how it actually is supposed to work, I would greatly appreciate a comment explaining how it works. Besides this, the gameplay and platforming is for the most part okay. There isn't really anything new or unique about it that makes the game stand out in any way, but it's by no means bad. The last aspect of the game that I'm going to touch on is the story and the storytelling. The game opens with an opening cutscene that is frankly very confusing. A lot of vague narration is given, and at the time most of it doesn't really mean anything to the player. This is carried on when you get into the game as well, as the first character you meet will be actively running away from you while screaming some vague sentences about you wanting to kill her. You give chase for a bit where you end up fighting a boss and saving this character. She then leads you to a village where the village elder gives you some more vague exposition that doesn't really tell you much directly, and then the demo ends. All this to say that the game's story is pretty vague and ambiguous. I do also have to point out that the English translation for the game is extremely poorly done. There's a fair amount of broken English and poor grammar throughout the game and in most of the dialogue. I'm not sure if this is something that is only for the demo because they didn't have the funds to hire translators, or if this is what is planned for the full release of the game, but it is something to look out for when the game fully releases. So all in all, I find Glimmer and Mirror to be a fairly interesting game. The stunning visuals is what initially drew me in, and it's honestly enough to carry the game through its rougher patches with its gameplay. I think it has a lot of potential to expand on what they already have, leaving this as one of the most promising upcoming side-scrolling platformers, in my opinion. Goodbye World is a game by Your Fiji. I tried to make a longer intro as I did with the other games, but I for the life of me could not find anything about this developer. I tried searching around for info about them but could not find anything on the English web. And I'm not able to read Japanese, so I could not research on any of the Japanese sites, so this will honestly have to do for the intro. The game follows our protagonists Kanye and Kumade and their journey in trying to make it in the video game industry. The game mainly follows Kanye throughout her early years, where it shows her trouble with socializing and connecting with other people. This is until she meets Kumade at college, and they soon start collaborating on games together, where Kanye does the story work and Kumade does the art. The story seems like it will focus on themes of social anxiety and the feelings of being out of place in society, as well as themes of finding the balance between creating art that both expresses what you truly wanted to, while also being accessible for other people to consume. I find all of the themes that the demo hints at to be very interesting, and I'm looking forward to seeing the rest of the story. As for the visuals, the game is presented in a retro-inspired style. The visuals are in a pixel style and also has a filter to make the game look even more like older games did at the time of release. This gives it a unique style when compared to most games of today, even when comparing it to other retro-inspired games. I do think this somewhat comes at the cost of readability of the text, as this is also in a lower resolution. While I understand it's for the sake of consistency, I would like to see the text being scaled up to be more clear to read. The game is pretty much just a visual novel, though interspersed throughout the game are little puzzle minigames that you have to complete to progress. The game you play in the demo is block based, where you pick up and put down blocks to make it through the level and reach the finish. The game itself is pretty simple, but still challenging enough to be fun in small doses. The minigames are cute and fit the aesthetic of the game perfectly in both visuals and music. Though I would like to see the game have a variation of these minigames throughout it and not just this single one. This was one of the shorter demos that I played, lasting a total of 20 minutes, and that is with me fiddling with some recording stuff and trying to get some extra footage. The demo is a total of 3 chapters, with it being stated that the finished game will be 13 chapters in total. This does leave me a bit scared that the game will be overall extremely short, so I think this is something that is worth keeping in mind when the game fully releases. This being said, I found this to be one of the more enjoyable demos that I did play. The story is well written and interesting, the minigames are well done and feel authentic. The themes are pretty interesting and honestly are ones that I don't think get used enough in media, despite being generally important themes to discuss. I very much look forward to the release of this game later this year, and I will be most definitely getting it at release. Nine Souls is a game produced and published by Red Candle Games. I think this is the first developer in this video you might have actually heard of before, as they have also made games like Detention and Devotion, which are both fairly well regarded games. Nine Souls seems to be the first attempt at an action type game, but like the rest of this section will tell you, I think they did a fantastic job. Nine Souls is a hand-drawn 2D side-scroller. The visuals for the game are genuinely breathtaking. I haven't seen a game even come close to this level of polish for the visuals since Hollow Knight. This being a comparison I'm going to make a few times in this segment. I wouldn't really be going into much depth when it comes to the story of the game, as I think experiencing it yourself would greatly improve your own experience. All I will say is that I found the story to be intriguing and compelling, with the demo leaving me interested in playing the full game. Like previously stated, the game is a 2D side-scroller with hack and slash combat, very much like Hollow Knight. Again, though Nine Souls comes with an interesting twist in that you have a counter. This alone makes combat a fair bit more complex, as you can dash and weave like normal, but also take the risk to try and parry attacks. As you parry attacks, you build up talismans, that you can use on powerful attacks where you dash through enemies and apply the talismans that explode after a short delay. This makes the combat a more risky but rewarding experience for the ones that choose to engage in these new mechanics, but from what I've played, you don't need to parry and can play it more akin to what you do in games like Hollow Knight. Honestly, I don't want to say much more than this. If what I have described so far, or what you have seen as the gameplay interests you, then I would seriously recommend that you check out the demo on Steam. It's free, it's not all that big, so you could be playing it in only a few minutes. It is a seriously well made game. It is the only 2D side-scroller that actually reaches the impossibly high bar that Hollow Knight left after its release. And I seriously believe that it might even surpass it. Please do check it out. Potion Permit is a live sim type game produced by Mass Hive Media. Mass Hive Media is also a studio that you might have heard of before, as they have made several games in the past that have been fairly well received, though I haven't personally played any of them myself. Though Potion Permit does seem to be their most ambitious game so far. The premise for the game is that you're an alchemist who has recently been assigned to a new town. As you arrive, you learn that the town used to have an alchemist from your organization long ago that apparently did a lot of not so great things. So it is your job to both meet the town's needs when it comes to potions and medicines, while also repairing the damage that the previous alchemist has done to the reputation of your organization. As for the gameplay, it's fairly standard as far as life sims go. You work on a calendar system where time progresses normally as it would in real life. Each day you will get a new task from the townspeople that you will need to finish by the end of the day. You will be doing these tasks by first going out in the forest and scavenging for materials. While out in the forest, there will also be monsters out and about that you'll need to avoid. When you have all the materials you will need to make your way back to your home, where you will brew the potions and medicines that are requested. The brewing itself is done in a fairly simple Tetris-like minigame, where you will place different sized blocks into specific forms, where the form is different for each individual potion. This makes for a fairly relaxing and chill gameplay loop that isn't all that challenging, but enough to keep you engaged. As with a lot of live sims, the real meat and bones of the game comes from the characters. In town, there are a whole slew of named characters that you'll need to interact with and do jobs for. Potion Permit is a bit different from most live sims though, as with most live sims, the characters are usually very welcoming and easy to make friends with. But in Potion Permit, almost all of the characters start out actively hostile towards you. This makes it so you have to actively gain their trust first, before you can properly start to befriend them. The main character is mostly a blank slate that will only express themselves with these cute little smiley faces that you most likely have seen throughout this segment already. I think this is a good choice as it lets the other characters be the main focus, and this also leaves a blank slate character you can easily self-insert into. The characters themselves are fairly interesting, all with unique in-game sprites that are well done and memorable. Only thing that I am missing when it comes to these characters is a more detailed picture of them when you're talking to them. Something like Stardew Valley has, where you can fully see what the character looks like. The pixel art style in the game is really well done and has a lot of detail, but it would still help a lot to have a non-pixel version for reference. Overall, the story is intriguing with likable characters that you would actively want to befriend and learn more about. The gameplay loop is relaxing, but engaging enough to where you won't get tired of it. I'm usually not a big fan of live sim games like this, because they're too open-ended and gives the player too much freedom with not enough goals, but I didn't find this to be a problem with Potion Pyramid, as you're given specific jobs you need to complete, while still giving you a fair amount of freedom with what else you need to do with your time. This is another game that I will definitely be checking out when it fully releases September 22nd. Well, making this video has been quite the experience. This was supposed to be a shorter video that I was going to make like as a break or side project from bigger projects that I'm currently working on. Admittedly, it might sound a bit weird considering the fact that I haven't uploaded in like several years now, like 4, but things didn't really turn out that way. I have taken a lot of breaks from making this, as I have been struggling with getting the motivation to do most of anything in the past year, but I'm glad that I finally got around to finishing it. I don't really think this is a particularly good video, especially with the voiceover, but at a certain point I just wanted to push it out and take what I learned from it and apply it to whatever I make next. As I've been working on this video, it also changed several times. Originally it was meant to be a much longer video covering a lot of games, but as I was making it, I realized that I would much rather make it about games that I genuinely enjoyed instead of games that I enjoyed and didn't. I will most likely eventually make games on stuff that I don't like as well, but for this video I wanted to keep it positive and use it for recommending games to others that I genuinely think has potential being fantastic. But with that being said, I'd like to say thank you all for watching until the end. If you have a criticism for this video, I would love to read about it in the comments, or in DMs if you're uncomfortable with the comments. I'm trying my hardest to improve on this sort of content and would love to hear what you think. Thank you for watching, and I hope you decide to check out any of the games that I talked about today. Thank you, and bye.